if you notice, when I'm defining subroutine by sub my macro, and let's say message box, hi. When you're going to the Microsoft Word, allow me to remove extra content. On the macro, we have access to this macro because it is inside of all this active document. Of course, we have an active document. I could run it and there it is. By default, when you're saying or defining something like that, it is public. And it is exactly same like say public and subroutine macros, something like that. Again, if I test, we have access to my macro and run. If I define another macro, sub macro 2, message box by, if I go to the Word and macros, you will see the macro 2, run. But instead of public or didn't define, which by default it is public, if I say private, now note that if I go back to the Microsoft Word macro, there is no macro 2. We have only my macro. So you have no access to that macro or subroutine. How about let's try, could we call it here inside of my macro? I could say call, which it is optional, macro 2. Let's try, is it working or not? This is public. So when you're defining public or even remove, which it is public again, you could find inside of macros of Word, and this is private, doesn't show, but I call that private subroutine inside of my public one. If I go to the Word, macros, my macro and run, as you see, it is accessible. So because this macro, although it is private, it is inside of the same module, is still accessible inside of that. This is local, but you cannot call outside of that module. But the public, it is actually globally accessible. This is also working for variables. As an example, I say them, I as integer, okay, and inside of my macro I say I equal 5. Also here on the general declaration, because I set them inside of general, it is public. It is similar to say public, I as integer, I equal something, and message box I. Let's try. Message box, okay. It is working. And we could actually, instead of them or public, say private. And when you're saying private, that means you don't have access to this variable outside of this module. This is similar to macro. However, because this is in declaration general of the same module, it is accessible. But as an example, if I create another module, from here I cannot get access to this private variable integer. This is applying for other elements such as classes or functions. I didn't introduce how we could make a function. However, we used many functions such as len, find, replace, trim, round, etc. But if I define something like function ABC, by default it is public. Doesn't matter if you type public or not. And just as an example, say message box AAA. Alright. Of course, I could access here, call ABC. Okay, and AA. Allow me to remove these. Okay. And inside of module 1, if I say something, sub A, and new macro, I'm calling this one, dot. Now we have access to this function. There it is. And if I set instead of public this function to private, now if I run that, compiler error method or data member not found.